This is Kathy Bogan for Consortium News, and I'm just entering the headquarters of David Bradbury, renowned Australian filmmaker, who is running in this upcoming election next week in the seat of Grayndler against Mr. Albanese. David, what brought you to run in this election?
I've got rocks in my head. That's what brought me here, Kathy. I thought that it was going to be a tough battle, and I've never had any really serious delusions that I can actually beat the Prime Minister. But I want to make a dent in the popularity of his image, both nationally and here within Grayndler, because I'm disgusted by the two-party system, both Albanese under Labor and Dutton even more so under the Libs Nationals. You always knew what we got with the Tories, but with Albanese, it's been a total sellout for the people that the Labor Party, with its proud tradition for over 150 years or so, stood up for. And I just know now that the two-party system is moribund. It's got to be replaced by vibrant independents, other parties, minority parties like the Greens, the Teals, and we can get democracy in Australia back on track.
Oh, may I take a seat, David?
Sure, go right ahead.
Talk to you about specifics. You made a great film just recently about AUKUS and the submarines. It was about a year and a half ago.
Yep.
Tell us about that aspect of your policy.
Well, I guess that's what motivated me, Kathy, to decide to run, because I have a great fear, a great concern, both as an anti-nuclear activist for over 50 years and as a result of my international reporting in war zones over the planet for the last 45 years. And I see very much there's a very real likelihood that Australia will be dragged into a nuclear war by the United States with China. And there are no winners at war anyway, but if it's a nuclear war, which it will most likely pretty quickly turn to, then Australia is going to be the prime casualty for that. It makes sense from a realpolitik point of view for China or Russia to send an intercontinental ballistic missile into Australia's backyard like Pine Gap, which is the second most important military strategic spy base in the world for the United States. It has the advantage of taking it out and rendering it useless, so it can't spy on what the Russians are doing and what the Chinese are doing. But it also means that it doesn't automatically end up in mutual reciprocity and mutual destruction between the United States and China or Russia. But for us, it's a total disaster. It means that the town of Alice Springs, just 27 kilometres away from Pine Gap, will be totally annihilated. If the government were to send in nurses and doctors, paramedics and emergency operators, they would have to ask for volunteers, because basically it's like Chernobyl. It's a death mission there to go into that. And depending upon what happens when the winds are blowing at the time that nuclear blast happened over Pine Gap, the winds would either blow it over eastward towards our major cities of Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, or westwards over towards Perth and lesser populations. But either way, the world and Australia will never be the same again. And I see there's a real distinct possibility, push comes to shove, between the United States and China, that we will be dragged into that. We've already got B-2 nuclear-loaded bombers in Tyndale, up in Northern Territory near Katherine. We've got B-52 bombers, similarly armed potentially with nuclear weapons, which did all the destruction 50 years ago during the Vietnam War. We've got HMAS naval base in Perth, which is allowing nuclear US warships and submarines, which are loaded up with missiles that can blow, one submarine can blow 24 cities off the map in something like about 19 minutes. And aside from the nuclear submarines that we're hoping to get, that $368 billion represents $35 million a day of our taxes that's going 365 days in a year for the next 30 years, which means that we won't have the money for public hospitals, public health, public education, and public housing, or even affordable housing. We could have a standard of living equating to Scandinavian countries if we played it smart and didn't put our taxes into the war weapons manufacturers in the United States and Great Britain, France, Germany, and here in our own country. But we don't. We have lame-brained politicians. We have lame-brained politicians who basically are going with the people that fuel their campaigns every 3 years. It costs a lot of money, as I can tell you, at the grassroots level, to be able to run a political party at election time to guarantee that your side is going to get in. It costs you millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And that means people paid workers. It means hundreds of thousands of dollars in television ads. It means hundreds of thousands of dollars in propaganda, printing materials, and so on. And that basically makes it a contest between Tweedledum, Dutton, or Tweedledee, Albanese. And that's what's taken genuine democracy and genuine choice out of the parliamentary system. So that's why I'm standing, basically to say at 73 years of age, I can't take it anymore. Yeah, and I'm hoping a lot of Australians will see that as well.
I understand, David, because you've been deeply involved in politics as well as being a superb independent filmmaker that has been nominated for 2 Academy Awards. You know what you're doing, but you've been deeply involved in the history of Australian politics and international politics for a long time. Could I move on? I saw you at a meeting at Glebe Town Hall about 2 weeks ago, and that was in relation to the Israel-Palestine issue. And we've just seen Blini Nirala back in the ICJ. This wonderful Irish barrister spoke 12 hours ago about what's happening in Palestine. What would you do to help those people? And do you think that that's a very important issue for Australians?
I was in the United States 2 days before Trump got elected in November last year, and I stayed until the inauguration and filming for that 3 months, 3 times a week, about good Americans that were going out to protest against the bombing of Gaza. I watched in disbelief as my fellow protesters and anti-war activists did, as Blinken and Biden gave approval after approval for container shipload after container shipload of 2,000-pound bombs, cluster bombs, ammunition to basically shore up the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. And I watched with disbelief in going into the Congress, into the Senate building, week after week, as these brave protesters went to see senators and congressmen and women to appeal to them to stop the bombs flowing by the Biden administration. And they got nowhere at all, because America is basically taken over by the weapons and the corporations, manufacturers and so on like that.
And lobby groups.
And lobby groups, yeah. And the Zionist lobby in the United States, I couldn't believe it. I knew it was strong. I know it's strong here. But going into that seat of power, where every 4th office that I went down with my camera, there was a flag for Israel and there was a flag of the United States, stars and stripes, and there was a big sign next to the office of the congressman, woman or senator saying, "We stand with Israel." And you know that's why there's no hope for the poor Palestinians to getting anything out of the 2-party system, the Democrats or the Republicans. And it's the same here with the Labor and with Liberals and Nationals now. Before, it never would. Tom Uren, a prisoner of war of Nagasaki, when the bomb was dropped over Nagasaki, supposedly Albanese's mentor and political godfather that taught him everything he knows, and Jim Cairns, who led the moratorium marches at the time of the Vietnam War, Gough Whitlam himself, who evidently has a photograph, Albanese has a photograph of Gough in his office. What does that mean to Albanese, that he's funding basically defence industry? There are 70 companies in Australia that produce vital component parts for the Lockheed Martin F-35 fighter. That's the fighter bomber that drops those 2,000-pound bombs on all those innocent people in Palestine, in the West Bank, and Gaza, South Lebanon there. And Australian companies, to the tune of over 70 companies, are providing those little important component parts that make the difference between whether bomb doors open or not, whether computers that radar and all that. Albanese and Richard Marles and Paddy Conroy, the Minister for Defence Supply and Industries, They could overnight stop that by saying, A, we're not going to give you any subsidies to produce them in Australia. B, we're not, because you're complicit in war crimes by sending those component parts over to Lockheed Martin in the United States to be able to send the F-35 bombers to the IDF.
So, yes, the Teals, some of the Teals, the Greens are really very concerned. But one of the problems in Australia is, like America, it's not so easy to speak out about what's going on in Gaza and the West Bank as well. People are frightened.
Yeah. And what do you think they're frightened, Kathy? Is it because of the Zionist lobby, as we saw come down in the last 12 months with these, rabid Zionists? I call them rabid. They just target people. They use hate emails, but then when you turn around and you say there's something basically inhumane, there's something genocidal by what Netanyahu and the IDF is doing in Israel, they then throw the Holocaust anti-Semitic card. I'm over that bullshit. They've been playing that for so long, while they're doing the same things to the Palestinian people as Hitler and the SS Nazis did to the Jewish people. And I'm ashamed of Mark Dreyfus, the Attorney General, who is the grandson of Holocaust victims from Poland that were put into the gas chambers, that he knows better, should know better, but in fact he's lining up with his Zionist buddies, going over and doing the job that Penny Wong should have been sent over as a foreign minister to do, because he's Jewish and because he's a sycophant to the Netanyahu regime.
Well, anti-Semitism wasn't a problem in Australia before people saw what was going on in Gaza. I mean, really, don't you think, well, first of all, that's been blown up quite a bit, and also that people have something genuine to complain about?
Yeah. I think it's tragic that it's taken the murder of over 50,000 innocent people in order to be able to put it in perspective, that starting to creep through mainstream media, of course, even the ABC with its so-called objectivity, with some exceptional reporting by John Lyons, doesn't really give the full picture. We've never heard on our mainstream media that Palestine existed before the Second World War for centuries, and Jewish people lived in harmony next to their Palestinian neighbours.
And Christians.
And Christians as well. But suddenly in 1947, when England discovered it had a Jewish problem, and it had a problem of the Jews, what do we do to them displaced in Germany and Poland and in Russia, then the Soviet Union, and in England? Quite frankly, at the time, Britain was quite racist towards Jews, and they saw them as being a problem politically and so on. So what did they do? They developed the thesis of bringing them over by ships and landing them into the Holy Land. And they took over the Palestinian lands, their vineyards, their villages. They armed the Israeli militia, who put up all young boys from the age of 11 against the village wall, teenagers, men, old men, and shot them. And those guns were supplied by the Brits with the support of America as well to solve the Jewish problem.
Yeah.
That's where it's come about, and bit by bit, through the 67 Six-Day War, Israel expanded its territory more, now to the point where the poor old Palestinians are basically going to be shipped out to anywhere Netanyahu and Trump can send them, so that Trump can make beautiful real estate beachside properties and make a lot of money for his family, and Netanyahu as well. And it's beyond a shame that the party of the little people, that the little Aussie battler that Labor Party used to represent, is not speaking out about that issue. Gough Whitlam, when he got into power, straight away stopped our involvement with Vietnam, brought the troops back home. A wonderful movement of human wisdom and intellect. Why doesn't Albanese follow in the steps of his so-called hero? He won't even listen to Paul Keating's advice that the subs are none of our business. They're lemons, and to get out of it there, Albo.
Yeah. Well, Ben Gvir is in the United States at the moment, and there's been quite a lot of protesting from Code Pink, even inside the Capitol. But it seems like one side of politics in Australia would welcome Ben Gvir, a convicted criminal, to Australia. Albo hasn't said much about that, has he?
Well, I think
What do you think?
He's in the position now that we saw how the Arab vote, the Muslim vote went, or is going on Saturday. His mate, Minister Tony Burke, for instance, is fighting for his seat, and Albanese is going to see a swing against him as well. He'll get in, I'm pretty sure, like that. But he's a smart operator, and although he, as from his student days and through up until 2 years ago, he was a strong, silent supporter of Palestine, politically, because of the lobby of the Zionists within the legal sections, within the media, Murdoch and so on like that. He just plays it very quietly and tries to be a Tweedledee or Tweedledum in the middle ground. And that is a shame, because to be a leader of a great country like Australia, Kathy, you have to lead. You have to have a vision of what is right, and you take the people with you. You don't listen to the rabid extremists on either side, the left or the right. You go what you know your heart and your conscience tells you. And Albanese hasn't yet found the ability, the grace, the courage. Basically, it takes a lot of guts to be able to do that with such sort of opposition.
Yeah.
And that is a shame of it, because he will go down in history as being just another Prime Minister, like Johnny Howard goes down in history and that, but not the great leader that he could be in standing up to the great Australian tradition, which is why we sent men and women off to the Second World War to fight Nazism, to fight extreme fascism. And that's what we should be doing, not sending in troops into Palestine, but certainly sending in peacemakers and nurses and paramedics and builders and the ADF to sort of drop supplies like that. I mean, what Netanyahu and what the IDF is doing is, I can't get words to it. I'm moved to tears, like we all are, by what's happening in our time.
There is a word.
Yeah. What is it?
Starts with G.
Genocide.
Yes.
That's what it is. That's what it is, folks. It's genocide. Until we, the people, tell our leaders it's not on, not in our name. We don't want this happening with other fellow human beings on the planet. Get those fascists out of there. That's what it's going to take. And only that. Your vote counts on Saturday, but it also counts for every 365 days in the year, between where you put your money and where you put your vote, your attitudes, your super funds, and so on like that. Until we get to a point where we really make them squeeze and hurt, the big banks and all the big war manufacturers and so on, we're going to have more and more of the same. And things are only going to get worse as the planet gets more and more smaller with its resources and its ability to be able to give resources that it would take 7 planets for us all to live at the lifestyle that we in the first world enjoy and take so much for granted. We've got climate change kicking in, we've got bushfires and floods, tornadoes all over the world. And what is Albanese and what is Dutton doing about that? Or they're saying, we'll give you a $14 break at the petrol pump, or we'll give you maybe some tax relief this year. They should be turning the ADF into being like the SES, well trained to be able to do that. That's for starters. They should be saying, stuff off to the fossil fuel companies. You know, we have a responsibility to the young kids of this generation, the teenagers, young people in their 20s, and babies that are being born now. Not in 50 years' time when they're well dead and gone and people were looking back and saying, what did Albanese do about climate change? What did Dutton do about climate change in their day? Sweet FA. And that's what's going down now at the moment, folks. And our kids are going to pay the price for it. Not in 50 years' time, not in 20 years' time, in the next 5 years' time and less than, because it's going off all over the planet. And that's another major reason, as a father of 5 kids, that I've come down to Sydney to stand against Albanese as a token voice in the wilderness to say, enough is enough, Albanese. Please, please turn it around and do something decent before you die.